reporting requirement metadata vocabulary working group, and it's composed mostly by members of the Digit B2 unit, interoperability and digital government, some coming from the digital ready policy making team, and some others coming from the CEMIC team. And in addition to this, we have of course colleagues from PwC, such as Bert, Thomas, and Alexander, that are really supporting us a lot in drafting all the deliverables concerning this specification. And of course, we have one of the main architects of this data model, which is Professor Monica Palmirani, which is full professor of, please tell me if I'm saying it wrong, but I think it's legal informatics at the Bologna University. Okay, next slide. Okay, so some housekeeping rules. So if you want to intervene during this meeting, please don't hesitate. Raise your hand, and we will give you the mic. And you can also, of course, ask questions in the Teams chat. And if you instead are looking for more information on this data model, please contact us at our functional mailbox EU Digital Ready Policymaking at ec.europa.eu. Next slide. Okay, a little bit on the agenda. So as it was mentioned in the initial email, in the invitation email, the first part of the meeting will focus on business information, such as what's already out there, what are the priority areas for the specification development, what will be some timelines in terms of delivery of the specification. Then we'll have a short session of Q&A, and then we'll go more towards the technical information. So really, what happened for this release 0.1.1, what are the planned changes for the new iterations, and then we will leave the floor to Monica, which will present a proposal for modeling temporal aspects of requests of these reporting requirements, and in the essentially, and also with some aspects related to what we like to define the execution layer. Finally, we will a little bit wrap up the discussion and essentially continue our work. Next slide. Okay, this is not a work in isolation. So we already did the first community meeting, and essentially here what we did, it was that we presented the reporting requirement metadata vocabulary. We presented this initial analysis that PwC performed on the starting of the specification, and then we tackled some initial change requests, such as some information related to the style guides, to essentially how to have a properly formed semantic data model, and some essentially we had some discussion on trying to harmonize as much as possible the use of definitions, and we presented a little bit. We also discussed a little bit on the context, or the business context behind why essentially we are developing this specific data model, and we presented a little bit how we were planning to work on it. The recording of the previous session can be found on YouTube, and you can also find the link at the relevant page in the Interoperable Europe portal. Next slide. Okay, next. Just a little bit introducing the context. This is a specification, a data model that started from the essentially was born from the needs expressed by the regulatory reporting community of practice. I think the need was expressed already in 2022, where there was this need of having a common vocabulary to use when dealing with reporting requirement in legislation, and this translated into the launch of the study on regulatory reporting standards, SORTIS in brief, which had two main parts. One, it was the development of a data model to essentially have this common metadata vocabulary to express reporting requirements. And another one, it was really more on the trying to experiment a little bit with it. So can we automatically instantiate by using natural language processing and other artificial intelligence techniques? Can we automatically instantiate this vocabulary starting from the legal text? Next, this was already here. You can see that it was the big involvement of the University of Bologna with Monica and the University of Liège with another professor, Ashwinitu. Next. Okay. What are the main use cases of this reporting requirement metadata vocabulary? So essentially, the focus of it consists in annotating these reporting requirements in existing legislation. By annotating, what do we mean? Essentially, we mean by identifying what needs to be reported, by whom it needs to be reported, to whom it needs to be reported, when it needs to be reported. Essentially, all these aspects that would lead essentially to be able to have a machine readable model of these requirements, and with the goal of having a sort of a data set, a sort of a knowledge graph in more technical terms that would be able to facilitate the identification of potential overlaps, redundancies, or inconsistencies in mandated data flows that are mandated exactly by these reporting requirements, legal provisions. Another core use case that we had, it was essentially identifying when this data needs to be reported, by when, and through which frequency this data needs to be transmitted, and this here already we identified the initial complexity of it. So I really identifying the start dates or the key milestones or the different processes involved into. Okay, see my camera is working now. The different use cases, the different dates that are involved into the execution of this request. Next slide. Okay. Another key aspect that we had, it was the legislation changes over time. So it was core for this data model to be able to identify when there were other legislation made changes into the reporting requirements, and this involved in many cases designing this vocabulary in a way that it was possible to monitor the different versioning of legislation, and it was also important to be able to annotate exceptions and legal relationships between the different aspects involved in reporting requirements. So, for example, clauses that affect directly the applicability of a specific requirement at a given moment in time. One typical case is when all member states must report or produce a report at a certain moment, except for one. And this was also part of the Sortis project, one of the outcomes of the Sortis project, where we leveraged, there was a proof of concept where a legal rule ML was used to leverage such essentially modeling capability. Next slide. And I think, yes, now I would leave the floor to Thomas Slangen, which will a little bit present what has been done in terms of documenting the work that has done until now. And as you can see, we have this approach that is very open in the data model specification, and we encourage any kind of involvement for all the people that are interested in using it, whether they're business user or more technical users. Please, Thomas.
Yes, thank you very much, Alessio. Indeed. So basically what I'm going to explain now is a little bit what we have done for the first release, or this release 0.1.1 that Alessio was mentioning of the RMV. And basically also highlighting again that our aim is also to obtain input from the community, as Alessio said, on the business and on the technical side. We believe this specification has a lot of applications in the future and would help in general the reduction of the administrative burden when it comes to writing legislation. So for you to know, we will of course share these slides, so you will have access to all the links that are included in these. But so what we will do is each release we will update, of course, the correct documentation, but we first want to present the RMV page in the Interoperable Europe portal, or join up as well, You may know it in that terminology. Basically, in this page, what we have is all the information of the RMV, which basically includes, first of all, an introduction to the project explained in layman terms. So for those who may not be super acquainted with modeling lingo, that will be much better, much easier to understand. Indeed, I see, Alessio, thank you very much for sharing the link. Then we describe it also briefly and what are the potential uses of the ontology. This was just presented by Alessio, but in any case, it's always good to have it in front of you. Then we also have practical information about how the vocabulary is maintained, including releases and governance procedures. And this is also something that could be interesting for you to read. And then also we have practical information about the RMV community, aka this meeting, and how anyone can get involved in the development of this RMV. We explain there what the next what the steps are and what are the communication channels that you can go to. And of course, you can always send us any requests or any additional information that you might need to us. I'm sure that would be very helpful. And of course, that will help the RMV working group, from which also you can be part of, to increase the application and the let's say the realization of this ontology as such. We also have additional resources for the public to access, such as, for example, the study, the video of the previous community meeting, and there we will update and upload all the videos of the community meetings, including this one. And of course, the link can be found in this slide, but also in the chat, because as I saw, Alessio provided the link already there. Then on the next, the other part of the documentation that we also have for release 0.1.1, and that this will be updated for each release, is the page in the CEMIC GitHub. Okay, this page basically is the specifications, if you want to call it, of the release. And in there, we have a particular structure that has been already defined. And of course, we can adapt it according to the feedback we receive. But mainly, it includes first a summary of the contents of the page, very briefly, a general introduction to the ontology, to the RMV model as such, information on the status, licenses, and conformance of the release. And then more on the technical side of things, an overview of the RMV model, including descriptions and definition of the entities, supportive entities, data types, controlled vocabularies used in the model, etc., etc. We also include the examples of how these releases support the use cases, and I think this is also particularly important for the future application or of the vocabulary. And then we also include guidance to support the implementation and an OWL representation of the model. Okay. You also have the link to release 0.1.1 there. And if I'm not mistaken, we will see this right now, but I think indeed, Alessio, the third link that Alessio shared is where you can already, if you want, include any comments that you might have to the release 0.1.1 and to the specification, so that we can then also integrate it into future versions, and we basically use the community and all your inputs that I'm sure will be extremely relevant. Okay. Just another point that is, I think, is good to understand is a little bit the governance procedure that we have for this specification. So basically, how do we work? We obtain, so imagine you provide the comments into the issues into the issues page that Alessio just shared. We, the RMV working group, which was presented before, we meet and we review these change requests and include them in our issues log in code.europa.eu. These where this source code of the specification is kept. We then implement these changes into the next release, and then we publish the release on a regular basis. We have already, let's say, a draft plan of the next release accordingly, and Alessio will go into more details afterwards. But as mentioned before, the releases will be published in the Interoperable Europe portal, where you will get all the information about the RMV, and we will create a new release page in the Summit GitHub, where again the specifications can be found. Okay. Something that we wanted to raise, and then I'll give you the floor, Alessio, if that's okay, is that yeah, as part of any specification, of course, we would like to get your involvement if you're interested in participating in the working group. As such, basically in this working group, again, we discuss any changes that need to be applied to the model in order to improve it and to make it more actionable as such. So if you want to be involved in this working group, you can send an email to EU Digital Ready Policymaking at eceuropa.eu with the subject RMV working group, your request if you want to participate in the working group, or if you have a particular question, the date of the request or question, and your name so that you can be contacted right after. Okay. Alessio, you had your hand raised.
Yes, I just wanted to say yes. So especially this participation, it's an open invitation, especially if you want to have a more active role. Right. And we meet normally weekly to be able to iterate very quickly on all the change requests, and we especially are looking for contribution from colleagues that are working on the same topic within the European Commission, and also from other European institutions, or from colleagues that eventually work on this in member states. So eventually, if you're interested, please don't hesitate to send us an email. We have these weekly meeting on Wednesday afternoons, and we would be more than happy when have more people joining us really even at the operational level, because a little bit of disclaimer, these meetings can be a little bit technical, but yes. And I think then if we can move to the next slides. Yes, to the next one. Here, essentially, this part is a little bit to discuss and to present a little bit two priority areas that we identified in the further development of this specification, and essentially continuing presenting a little bit our timelines. Next slide, please. Okay, so essentially, our priority area number one is the integration of the RRMV data model with the data model for interoperability assessment and for the legislative, financial, and digital statement. Just to give you a little bit the wider context, the Interoperable Europe Act mandates conducting interoperability assessment prior to making decision on new or significantly modified binding requirements that impact trans-European digital public services. This is foreseen in Article 3 of the Interoperable Europe Act regulation. This applies to both public administrations in member states and public administration at the level of European institutions, bodies, and agencies. So to incorporate this new requirement into these procedures, the European Commission has introduced what we call the Digital Ready Policymaking Framework, which is a set of procedures for the early identification of digital elements in legislative proposals, and involves performing a legal analysis on the draft legal text to identify and analyze requirements of digital relevance. So essentially legal provisions that concern data, digital solution, the automation of business processes, and or digital public services. This legal analysis must be published as part of the legislative proposal within the digital dimension chapter of the legislative, financial, and digital statement. You may know the legislative financial statement because of a decision by the college. This was, I think it was because of an amendment to the financial regulation. This became the legislative, financial, and digital statement. And this statement is now mandatory for all legislative proposals and serves as the interoperability assessment of European Commission initiatives. Next slide. Why this? Why do we want this integration? Because actually the full value of interoperability assessment and of this digital ready analysis can only be harnessed by making this information reusable, available, queryable, and interconnected at European level, and potentially even across all public administration in Europe. Because in such a way, we can derive some insights to support more user centricity when drafting policies, to enhance the reusability of digital solutions and data, to reduce administrative burden, and actually to support the application of the once only principle. So all of these small objectives contribute to reducing the cost of digital implementation of policy proposals and on enhancing European competitiveness. As such, this offers a robust reference for administrative simplification. Next. Okay. Considering all these context, DigiB2 is developing a semantic data model to be able to create a sort of a digital twin of the requirements of digital relevance within legislation. And here, the specification is still in development. This data model is still in the development stage, and we identified some competency questions that would guide this kind of analysis, such as what are the key functionalities required for the digital solution mandated by a specific regulation, and which other reusable digital solution provides some functionalities. Which are the specific legal provisions in the EU legal acquis that require the collection of data on, for example, fish catches, and under what circumstances can this data be reused or shared? What are the current barriers hindering the legal interoperability of statistical information within the agricultural sector, and how might they be addressed? Essentially, these competency questions a little bit already reflect the structure of the digital chapter of the legislative, financial, and digital statement. But essentially, what we aim to do is really to try to make these two data models interoperable between each other by design. So essentially, we are still at the development stage and design stage, and although we have some restraints, we also have some ways to make them compatible with each other. Next. Exactly because of this, there are clear synergies between the RRMV and the interoperability assessment application profile, legislative, financial, and digital statement application profiles. First of all, because reporting requirements are information requirements, which are themselves requirement of digital relevance. Then the digital dimension chapter of the legislative, financial, and digital statement includes a section dedicated to data and data flows, aka reporting requirements. And then the core unit of analysis of both these data models are exactly legal requirements. Then the question is that what the working group asked itself, it was, can all requirements of digital relevance be modeled with the RRMV data model? This is still an open question that we are really exploring, and we would also like to hear a little bit your view on this. And then finally, systems leveraging the legislative, financial, and digital statement application profile, of course, should also be capable of leveraging the RRMV. So this essentially facilitating the integration and interoperability of these two data models is a priority area for the development of the RRMV working group, and it's essentially what really we plan to work on from now on until I think we put it until mid-March. Okay, then let's move to the other priority area. Yes, so at the current stage, now you can see a graph representing the current version of the RRMV data model. During the analysis that CEMIC helped us perform on this ontology, they identified essentially three main layers, but the ones that we're really interested in are, and it's currently supported by the RRMV, it's this one, the legal layer. You may recognize, if you have seen the previous video, the request, the reporting requirement that mandates an action, the action result deriving from the execution of this action, and the role of the agents. But what actually we realized it was missing is having a data structure capable of going at the execution layer. So by execution layer, we mean the execution of the request, the execution of the reporting requirement. And if we go to the next slide, maybe we can a little bit express it. So exactly in this first release, 0.1.1, so still it's a draft release. It's designed to address these initial use cases. So querying the legal acquis for what do agents needs to report to whom and when. essentially querying the legal obligation, querying the legal acquis, and then assessing the coherence, overlaps, and simplification potential at the level of the legal layer. But at the same time, what we realized it was missing at that stage of development is that other two key use cases that would further enable the reduction of administrative burden and of reporting burden, essentially enabling policy officers to search for existing datasets that were already collected and easily identify under which condition this dataset could be reused in order not to ask to the same agent the same information two times, essentially. The true application of the once only principle. And then, of course, verifying which systems were used to perform to transmit this information, to perform the reporting, and verifying whether a report has been performed or not, if the specific actor did not report in time, or maybe the specific actor reported a little bit late, or reported data that was not fully compliant with the mandated specification. And in order to do that, next slide. In order to do that, we started developing some initial competency questions again, essentially to really try to understand what are we looking to model, no? So who has performed a specific reporting action that led to which result and according to the deadline, who was late, who did not report at all, which data and according to which standard was reported by the execution of a specific reporting requirement and by whom. And finally, which IT solution supports a specific data flow mandated by a reporting requirement. So these are the two core priority areas for the future development, and we already placed them in our planning. Next, so we plan to release essentially to try to make this interoperability between the RRMV and the LFD SAP by mid-March, leading to a true 1.00 release, so essentially the first version of the that could go into production of the RRMV. And then we aim for end of April for a 2.0 release that would extend the RRMV to the execution layer. Additionally, we have another activity in the RRMV working group, which is collecting further use cases that could where this specification could be used, and this is a little bit of an open invitation. We have a longer deadline of 15 of June 2025, and of course you are all invited to reach out to your stakeholders and eventually propose some additional use cases really that we would verify whether they would fit within the main scopes of the specification. Having said this, I think I don't know if there are any questions or if anybody would like to intervene on this. We have a small moment of feedback foreseen in the agenda. I don't see. Okay, please.
Yes, hello. Thanks for an interesting presentation. I have one question on this legislative finance and digital statement that you mentioned. So, and on it's obligatory for all legislation that contains reporting requirements. Did I understand correctly? Or what are the conditions under what conditions is this document obligatory?
Okay. So the legislative financial and digital statement is mandatory for all legislative proposals. So we are speaking of regulations, directive, decisions by the Commission. We have maybe we can put here in the chat the link to the intranet where we have all this information and the specific number of acts. And it's a mandatory act. It's a mandatory addendum to the legal proposal before inter-service consultation stage. It's not at the current state, it's not mandatory for implementing and delegated acts. Although in case the interoperability assessment obligation applies, it is mandatory in that case, and then we have a set of rules and a decision tree to be able to identify this. Did I answer this question?
Okay, so delegated acts, you say that and implementing acts are not obligatory unless the interoperability is an obligation. And
Yes.
under what condition is interoperability an obligation?
In case a requirement concerns okay, let me phrase it better. In case that specific act sets a binding requirement that concerns digital public services, trans-European digital public services. But in case the digital public service is provided by a new institution, body or agency, in that case, essentially it's trans-European by default.
Thank you.
No problem.
Sorry, Alessio, could I add something to your answer, in which case is mandatory for the implementing delegating act? So first of all, as Alessio said, it's still to be updated on the site that was put there by Cecile. There are still discussions in the commission, so between DIGIT, Secretariat General and Legal Service. But here is because, so if you have in the original act, so the one that was at the basis of the implementing delegating act, you have the interoperability assessment. No need to do it again in the implementing delegating act, except if this implementing or delegating acts do come with major changes in the assessment of digital, so this digital dimension, not only the interoperability. And so we'll have this transition period because we do not have yet the digital dimension assessment in the main acts, because this is something that is mandatory as of 1st of January. And so we need to do it in the implementing delegating acts under the condition that Alessio explained. But normally in the future, we will have it on the original act. And as I said, only if the tertiary legislation, so the implementing delegating acts, will change a lot, so we'll change these digital dimensions. We needed to do it also on the digital, on the delegating and implementing act. And it's not about, it's only about the digital dimension. So it's not the legislative, financial and digital statement. So it's the digital statement, if you want. So not financial part. This is something else. This depends on other factors.
Thank you very much, Cristina, for this. I didn't have the definition ready, and thank you very much for making this precision. Let's say, yes, it's only substantially modifying the original binding requirement. Okay. I think we can go forward. If there are no other questions, I think we can go forward with the presentation. And now we're just a little bit of a disclaimer. We are going a little bit more in the technical side of the specification. So really going at the semantic level. And now I would leave the floor to Bert and Davide that would a little bit present what it changed from the previous version that some of them may have viewed. And yes, that's it.
Thank you, Alessio. So I'll present you short. So in the first slide, what has happened since the last community meeting, so in the formal sense of the specification. So at that point in time, we had only a very early draft of what you see on the right-hand side, and what is the link that Thomas mentioned earlier on. So we have now a more mature version of it, ready for you to read, to check, and to validate. What's in there, so what we applied is according to the agreement in the last community meeting to apply the CEMEX style guide on it. And that means that we did some visual representation, reorganization, but as well agreed. And so this persistent URIs that were agreed in the previous community, applied them. And we did some harmonization of the definitions that were present and to make it a complete document out of it. So we add some extra context, use cases, examples, etc. And this can grow now over time. So this is the first step, let's say, for you then to look at it, say, go ahead, what we can do with it. Nevertheless, so that meaning doing this activity, we see then some challenges, and some of the challenges we found worthwhile to discuss with you, and that are the 6 ones that we have identified for this meeting. Yes, Cecile?
Yes, in fact, maybe it would be interesting if you can remember, I don't know, to say from who comes the issue specifically when it comes from the people of the ELI work, the ELI people that provide. That will be interesting for publications office. So please don't mention when it comes from ELI.
Yeah, so we have different elements here and different issues that are coming. So we have the 6, and the 6 we want to highlight and to give you a context, and then maybe you have some early feedback or directions that we have to go for, and that's what we want to do collaborative with you, so that we go forward on that. So in the first one, so just switch to the next. I'll go to one by one. Which one are there? That's more clear. So the first one, and this is Monica will point some extra stuff as well at the end to it. But when we look to the current specification, we identified that yes, there's need for this temporal information, and as you know, in legislation, information may be present in a very precise way, temporal information, and then we can map it technically nicely to a date or to some structure to it. However, often it is not like that. It's circumscribed. The first working day after, 2 months after the directive gets into force, upon request, no sooner than. All these kind of formulations are more vague and circumscribing a temporal context. And if we look to the current model, then we see that there is a binding towards a kind of a strict timing to how, so a technically formalized way. We try to be as flexible, as open as possible, but we still see that there are limits on the current model. We are looking for it today. The model that we refer to, the temporal information all time, is very broad, but still not able to capture in that ontology this broader circumscribed temporal information. So we are looking for a solution for that. So you're probably not semantic experts, all of you, but if you have, we are looking for suggestions for approaches for that. So 2 elements that we identified into it, and that has to do with the example as well. So we have 2 proposals, and we go to the first proposal. I want to challenge with you, this is a good idea. Yeah, so is that when we look to the information that is in legislative texts, then in the example, and Alessio made that early on in the early stages, and that we connected to the model, then we annotate where this information has come from. And you see that in the current model, there is this RMV and has annotation property, which covers this piece of text that has been colored, that has been identified in the legal text to capture what is a request or what is the action associated to the request. Now, our proposal is to lift and to apply this kind of style to all elements that we identify in the legal text, as including temporal information, so that we have the sentence as sooner than, and if that is mentioned, that we associate this with the temporal information where this action has been happening at a certain time, so that we have a system and can be made this coloring and this information being capturing way more better. That is not precise enough, but at least we have a reference to the legal text of this temporal information. So this is our first proposal, to do that and to apply this as a generic pattern wherever we do we have the similar challenge. I don't know if there's any reaction to it on this proposal.
Yes, because we have another proposal.
You have another proposal to deal with that.
Yes, it's what we are going to present, and is an extension of the RRMV for managing the time in a more appropriate way.
Okay, let's see over there. So what it's
So-
then? Shall we postpone, because it's a bit of, we try to
I
organize
propose. So I propose
Yes.
that we postpone this discussion on temporal information until Monica has the chance to present her proposal. Bert, I think it's.
Yeah, let's do that. But I'll just introduce the other one, and then we can discuss then without discussion, so that we have everything at the. So the other proposal is what we saw is that at this moment, is mapped on a proper interval, which is in all time, and not the most general representation of temporal information. And we propose to lift it to the most general information, so that we have all possibilities open for this property. That are the two proposals are related to this. Okay, so I'll go on. So then the second challenge that we saw when we evaluated the model is that there is this notion for an action that is interacting with a particular agent in its role. So this is the agent role entity. And then this agent role is composed of what is the agent for this agent with this role. But what we see in the examples and in the texts and so on is that at the level of role, we know it's a publisher, a submitter, a reporter, etc. And then this extra level of grouping the kind of roles in types, I wonder if this is needed. I don't see at this moment this case and the use case where this is happening.
Yes, it is necessary, obviously, because the role is a superclass, and you need to have the role, let me say, in terms of authority, like a commission and so, and the name of the agent inside of the role. But the role of the type is related to the reporting request. So if it is addressee or addressor, so this is a role type, but the role of the institution is in general. So there is a role.
But what you mean the role of the institution? Because then we are talking about. So if you in the current model, the action is related to the agent role.
The role type is inside of this modeling. The role type respects the reporting request, and the role is a general level for making integration with our ontology, and so to have a possibility to have a reasoning at the role level. If you jump this level, we lose completely the capacity to have inferring and reasoning about the abstract role independent to this typical scenario. So this is the way classically is a pattern to have a role and a role type, and the role type is fitted with this specific use case, but the role is in general.
Can you give
but we can, in any case, this kind of issue, I suggest to have a meeting each other before in order to have enough time to discuss technically speaking and to understand the reason why and to enter in deep, because during these meetings like these, we don't have enough time, 10 minutes, to discuss one by one this kind of issues.
Yes, I see. Sorry for intervening. I see that Claudio has raised the point in the chat. Maybe Claudio, if you want to say it loud to contribute to the discussion. Otherwise, I would say that we follow the suggestion to organize then ad hoc meetings to address these very specific issues that indeed need, and to postpone this issue and to go to the next one that will be maybe quicker in its. Yes, please, Claudio.
Hey,
go ahead.
Thank you. Generally, I mean, modeling it's hard enough, and transferring the reason for modeling certain scenarios is also complicated. So as a suggestion, when we present any solution for tackling a certain modeling issues, and it's very easy to put together all of the competency questions that particular modeling will answer, because then you can directly see what kind of knowledge is captured, and then if that knowledge is captured like in natural language, then we are sure that modeling decision fits. But otherwise, I mean, I'm of the field. I do this for many years, and it's complicated to make up all of the reasoning behind the modeling. So for the future, also for the people who are not of the field, just use competency questions that are captured by, in this case, role and role type, anything, which will help at least in the conversation.
Yeah, that's good. But this is the question. So what are the competency questions behind this one? Because at the moment, there's in the model no clear reason why.
I think we will be able to have we can postpone this issue, and we can have a separate discussion and continuing the debate. And also maybe a good idea would be that of providing some concrete examples in order to also to clarify the modeling choice, which is indeed an original pattern that is used to model this kind of contents. So maybe we can move to the next issue and postpone this one. I think that.
Okay. So this one has to do with the other, because if you saw that there was in role type mentioning as a subclass of SCOS concept, meaning that we want to organize and build up code lists and harmonize the codes to be used in conjunction with the RMV. So we already reached out to the publications office to establish a placeholder and an action and a place for creating those code lists. But of course, these code lists have to be created and maintained and at the right place. So we have taken this initiative. This is ongoing, but in order to make the RMV useful, you need to use it in conjunction with these code lists. That will be a list of separate values, and it might be a separate topic sometimes, how to add and how to make the distinction between the different values, etc. So this is not part of the semantic model, but it's part of the story, and in order to reuse everything together. So that's the reason why we will maybe discuss as well on the content of the code list in the future. But you have to know that this is available and that we're setting up everything to create a discussion and value about this. So this is more an announcement that we are taking care of it. Okay, so this question 4 was reached out on the first review in summer, where a Polish reviewer, Jaroslav Dymin, highlighted that actually every legislation has its URI, and he questioned the property has URI for that because everything has its ELI. So why adding this property if it's already there? And then looking from that perspective, then the question is as well, if linked data is as well the base technology, then you see there is actually even not a need for deduplication of saying an additional property what the identifier is, because it's part of the structure of the data to be shared. So in the example that you see on the right-hand side, you see example requests, column requests, and a very long thing. That's the URI of that request. And then you have a property has URI with actually the same thing, but in string expanded. So the question is why doubling it? If it's linked data is the prime annotation and the discussion area of the format where it has to be queried upon. Finally, and that's a second element into it, if there are additional identifiers to be recorded on entities, CEMIC has a general approach to it, and it triggers this, addresses this with ADMS identifier. This covers the needs of having multiple identifiers where the prime one is the URI associated with the entity.
Thank you very much, Bert. I see that Alessio raised his hand, or maybe not.
No, I think maybe it's better first to have Monica speak.
Yeah.
I just wanted to have I would have like to have a point on the fact that it's also important to take into account other standards that are present in the legal domain, such as Acomantoso. But maybe this was maybe I personally am not very much knowledgeable of ADMS identifier, and it could be also a solution to use it for this disambiguation of having multiple ones. Now I don't know in the detail the pattern, but maybe I don't know, Monica or Bert. I know this is a very highly technical discussion in my view.
Yes, also this topic need a very long meeting, in my opinion, on 10 minutes. Everything is related to FRBR of Acomantoso because AKN for EU is a standard approved by all the institutions of Europe. We need to take in care that ALI as a syntax, but Acomantoso is another one, and especially with the fragments. ALI can't manage the fragments in the tail of the point of a point of a point, and Acomantoso is capable to do so, and ADMNS is obviously from CEMIC, but AKN as a standard of OASIS native naming convention. So according to UNDO ontology that is approved also by the United Nations and is a basic ontology for Acomantoso, we follow these and we reuse as much as possible of UNDO ontology that is based on FRBR and naming convention of Acomantoso according to the specification of AKN for EU.
But this doesn't answer now the question, for what is it needed? And that's the question.
It's super needed. It's needed for maintaining aligned all the versioning and the point in time annotation, because ALI is not capable fully to have this capacity in the fragments, and also to maintain aligned all the other institutions with the ACAN for EU. So ALI is only for the Gazette, but what about the other institution and the other URI that are important as well? And so it is important to have.
Yeah, and the question is why it's only a URI, why it's not some other identifiers that might be useful?
Because Acomantoso, that is a standard admitted in the naming convention compliance technical norms. These are kind of URI. All the URI coming from Acomantoso, or if you read the compliance norms in the naming convention, admitted compatible URI. ELI was admitted as a compatible in the third level, 0 level of a compatibility. Not all the permanent URI has a similar compliance with Acomantoso. There are technical norms of a standard of OASIS.
And then the question is if we look to the reuse or the usage of RMV beyond things that are modeled in Acomantoso, I will not show a sense of things like Cecile mentioned, like harmonization of standardization requests and so on. I don't know if this use is beyond.
We can use in any case AKN for any, the naming convention is adoptable in any situation, independently to the format of the XML. Probably you need to take a look to the naming convention of Accomantoso as is, because it is good also for the paper, not only for Accomantoso file. So there is portals for transforming all the link in such a format FRBR based in Accomantoso naming convention, independently to the format of the document that could be PDF, TIFF, image, page of the Wikipedia, or whatever. The problem is to be compliant with the FRBR and to maintain aligned expression, work, and manifestation in order to maintain a good approach harmonized of the timing and versioning over the time.
Thank you very much. I personally see the point that Claudio raises in the chat concerning wise redundancy, which can be accepted. Multiple identifiers can potentially be accepted from an ontological engineer perspective. And but considering the complexity of the topics that we are addressing and of the issues, I would also suggest to postpone a bit the discussion. Although I think that double identifiers do not necessarily, let's say, create confusion or relevant problems within the data model.
May I just this not double? It's actually. Here it is about what is the expectation of the value of this property as well. Has URI always the URI in the structure? Do you want to be that? Is that the case? It's something else, because it's about the semantics of the property. What does that thing carries? And that's for me unclear. And this is the same thing I see happening in DKTP and in other contexts, where they start having multiple identifiers in the format and they don't agree on what is the master of it. And that's why I raise this point, because it's important to know what is the master, where can other systems rely upon, and what they have to use. That is the reason why this topic is so important. And that's why we have to, I know we will close down, we go to the next, but this is the reason why I want to
Okay. We can discuss, because the reason is that URI, I see the comments of Baldassare, is fully a semantic, because there are parsing of the URI for all the token of the semantic, and using URI made in such a way, ALI is one of the family, as I said, you can grasp immediately the point in time and the versioning, and to point out and follow track changing over the time of the reporting request. So opaque URI or persistent opaque and not based on FRBR are very bad for the legal domain, because you can't do so.
Thank you very much, Alessio. I see that Alessio.
Yes, I wanted a little bit to sum up a little bit. My take out of this is that indeed we may have a need for support to multiple URIs. We also have a need to be able to support multiple levels of compliance in order to ensure compliance with Accomantoso standards, with ELI standards, and I think this is something that maybe we could add it as a new change request that would be dedicated in a specific RNMV working group. And again, I realized again the invitation by Cecile that anybody that would like to participate to this discussion, namely I see there is Claudio, Bert, Davide, Monica, probably also Willem from OP. Maybe we should organize a dedicated meeting really to target this specific URI related issue, but with the caveat and the requirement that we would need support for multiple URIs while preserving certain level of semantic formality. That's the way that I would approach this if everybody agrees. And then yes, I would move to the next change.
Yeah. So the next thing is to clarify the understanding a bit. So what I want to start the topic with is with three assumptions. So looking for RMV as if we have annotated the legal text using the vocabulary, Then we have a policy officers that have this information at hand and can deal with it. Then secondly, it's an assumption that this annotation is an interpretation of the legal text. It's not the legal text itself, it's an interpretation of it.
No.
And thirdly is that it's an
No.
assumption.
No. This is not interpretation at all on the legal point of view. Is a fragment. Request is a fragment. This is a wrong assumption. Okay? The request is a fragment of a text, full stop, no interpretation. The interpretation is the extraction of this. So this is assumption. Interpretation means I give an interpretation, legally speaking, of the fragment of the text. I take only the fragment of the text, so it's not interpretation.
Can I believe here, this is a question more of a change request. So thank you very much, Monica, for this clarification. Something this is, in a way, I've been working with you on this also for a very long time, since the bay. Maybe I was not really into the specific development, but it's something that actually I also would like to ask you. Because in a way, by qualifying a legal text as a request, why doesn't that provide makes it an interpretation?
It's not a legal interpretation, it's annotation, it's different. Because legally speaking, interpretation means to have a semantic interpretation of the legal norms, not the annotation of the text. So to isolate the annotation of the text is a level, but the interpretation of a legal text is another thing. So in our ontology, the request is just to isolate the piece of the text. It's so true that sometimes we take all the article. You remember that in case of list of a point, we have a connection of the request in multiple points, and we are not capable to isolate all the points connected each other. It's a step forward in the action. I can make the interpretation, and the action I select which action are the first, the second are related with, and this kind of interpretation.
I see your point, but I'm still struggling to understand, because the moment that I qualify something as a request, in my view, and annotating, the first point I annotated, why not using a legal ELI legal subsection then, if it's just the text? But maybe it's a stupid question because I'm not so strong in semantics, Sir Davide, and you, and
to me, this is the part of a way indeed sensitive, in the sense of if it's just text annotation, the fluid coloring that you do, okay, then it's just text annotation, and I have no semantics or no interpretation. I will not do anything with it. From the moment I put it as a request and I give it an identity, and I'm going to manage and act upon, and I manage it, because that's the last assumption into it. So I can make mistakes. I can make a wrong coloring of it. What happens then? Is then the legislation wrong? In the system, or is it correct? And this is I would like to disconnect those things from each other. The fact that somebody has colored it and acts upon that coloring versus the legal text as it stands in its own right.
For this reason, FRBR has a solution, because using a URI of the expression, you can create multiple also interpretation in your meaning. So you can maintain inside of triples a multiple interpretation using manifestation that is not included now, but because it's linked with the expression, you can create interpretation of Monica, interpretation of Alessio, interpretation of Davide, and at the manifestation level, you can make these with a URI that previously we discussed before, that is not a lie, but is very important for this reason. So all the system has a very well knowledge concerning all these topics for maintaining consistent also in case of multiple interpretation. I give an example. One officer annotate a reporting request in such a way, another one in another way. In this model, it's possible because you have as URI, and you can also to annotate as URI of a particular expression or manifestation that you are talking about.
But a request in your idea then, or in the way that you explain, is that then at the level of the FBR expression layer, the conceptual, or at the level of the manifestation?
Yes.
What is in your opinion? What is in your, which level is it in the FBR?
Depends on the level of interpretation, because if the interpretation is official, is an expression interpretation of the court, for instance, or of the parliament. If it's interpretation from Monica or from another, it's not official, is my interpretation, is at the manifestation level of my interpretation that is not official and not institutional. So depend on the legal point of view of the level of interpretation. If the interpretation is authentic, you have an expression. And it's so true that also inside of several databases, there are expression of a constitutional court or other particular, the corregenda. The corregenda is an expression because there is a modification and also interpretation of this modification. If the interpretation is from University of Bologna by Monica, is a manifestation level, because I take the official version provided by the EULEX and I provide my particular interpretation for my scope. So all the model is resistant and robust enough to maintain all these pieces aligned, because it's a matter of the topic of discussion for years inside of a Comantoso OASIS technical committee.
But now to come to the whole question then, and then I'm posing it to Cecile, Alessio, and Davide, and to you. At which level do you see RMV requests and so on operating? Mostly at the manifestation level, as Monica explained, namely it is an interpretation by some DG, policy DG that is following a thing, or so at the other level, but then we come into a very sensitive thing, because how you get that knowledge inside the legal publishing part, and then I don't know, then I'm lost. So this is
but precisely, I think it was the beauty of what Monica designed, is that it is meant to be part of the acquis. So it is part of the legal layer. It's official, and what happens is that this vocabulary will be used to annotate the legal text that will be published in the official journal, and all the elements, the annotations here, they will be available inside the official version of the text. And so this request, so this excerpt or a part of the text that means something for the scope that we define, their life is completely embedded into the life of the bigger of the legal text. It cannot be so. It can be more interpretations by the one who have to implement it. It's true, but the one that we want to make available is part of the official journal. If I maybe am too
and now,
to business level, but
yeah. And just to comment, and Cecilia, you can, and then I'll give the word to Davide to continue on that. Suppose there's a mistake made into it. Is that then an official republishing of the legislation?
A corrigendum. So it's how legislation life. There are mistakes, in the transposition of the translation, whatever.
If the technical annotation that is behind the scenes is being done wrongly, so it's not visible for the outside world, then you would publish a corrigendum because of the annotation. It was wrong.
So this is the consequence.
Yes, it's my understanding.
Yes.
To understand that. This to clarify the understanding of the process. No, that I'm asking. Okay.
Yes,
David,
I'd like to comment on this very quickly. It is, I personally endorse the idea that the request contains the legislative enunciate that refers, which is the text, the legislative text, the official legislative text, that represents, that contains, semantically identifies and syntactically identifies the request itself. So it's strictly linked to the legislative text. I think that is still truer in the framework of reporting obligations. Reporting obligations, reporting requirements are not subject to such a broad margin of interpretation as different requirements. They are pretty, let's say, easy to read. The meaning is in themselves most of the time contained or referred to. The discussion is interesting when we will have the need to expand the scope of the data model in order to encompass, in order to model requirements of digital relevance or in general legal requirements. This will be, the interpretative layer should be then more carefully taken into consideration, maybe.
Okay, I think this is really worth. First of all, it's a very good discussion. I also see that Tamas is writing something on the legal theory perspective on the how it qualifies the interpretation offered by the legislator. So I think this could be a very nice topic for really a long discussion really dedicated to this. So. And I think these community meetings are a really good point to identify where there are the most problematic discussions and where that would need a longer deep dive, if you allow me this term, and where instead we don't have so many problems. I would propose to go forward because I'm a little bit mindful of the time, and I hope is all right for all the people if you're interested in this discussion.
We discussed this.
I think this is related to the previous one, and we can have
this you skip. Yeah. So this one is a last topic that we want to highlight is that in the current model, if we look to the model, then we see that there's a possibility to chain actions. But there is a possibility in the case that in the legal text, actual requests are being chained. So this is an example of a directive. And if you would analyze and annotate it, then in the next slide, you would see that there would emerge, Thomas, the next slide. Yeah, there would emerge this kind of structure where you have request one with a number of chained actions that we already can express, but there's a follow-on request after request one has happened. So this kind of sequentially actions, how to denote or how to make that visible, and that we would like, I think there's a need for it. So this is the point to it. And then we need to, in the next slides, then the proposal is to use and to extend ROV has next as well to the request level. So this is the simplest approach that we see at this moment. Maybe there are some other approaches to that, but anyhow, this shows that it is as well more complicated than just chained actions in a legislative text. Wow.
Our proposal is not to add the next in the request, because the request need to be annotated with the time, and the time is connected not with the request, with the action, and the execution is not a request, is execution of an action, ontologically speaking. I request something, that is concretized in action, and I operating with action in a given time. So when I would like to answer, give me all the action performed, I don't ask to the request, I ask to the action that I need to do, and the time when I activate the action is a point in time of action. So our proposal, I saw the problem, because also I show a case, is to improve another, or to improve also as next, or to add another relationship as connected. And because it's connected, is probably, not probably, is connected, could be another property with the time. We can model not only the next, but also connected in non-sequential way, because we have also cases where the action are connected not in sequential, not as a next, but also connected, and it is in a given time, not next. So this is our proposal, not to have a next in the request, because it's not, but in the actions. And because the action is linked with the request, you can, in any case, to retrieve and make a query, but also with all the properties of the action, point in time, actor, agents, role, and so far.
With that, so if I understand well, to summarize it, is that you would add, your suggestion is to add another property not called has next, but has connected or is connected between requests.
There is a related to, you can see, is related to is already exist. We needed to expand related to, or this existing one, because next in our thought initially, let me say, the frequency. When you have a frequency to report every year, the action are automatically performed by algorithm in order to create inside of a triple store also the prediction of the next 5 years. We are doing the same for the United Nations or the WHO, the same task. They needed to detect automatically using AI the request in the text and also the fragment, but also to figure out the next action of the 5 years for figure out. Also in the next, there is also the next report according to the frequency of 1 year reporting. And I can calculate and populate the triple store with this action for predicting and simulating the future action expected. This is very relevant for the political and the policy. So we needed to expand these existing relationship, not only in the request, but in the action.
Mm-hmm. So
Alessio, if you agree, I would give the floor to Claudio for a second, very quickly, if possible, because he was suggesting a different approach. Maybe he wants to comment on this.
Yeah, so this what I'm about to say will only make sense to modelers. Okay, so as next doesn't necessarily have a connotation of time, it's only procedure. As next doesn't say when. Then instead of using as next, we could use depends on, which makes a relationship of dependency, and you can bound that relationship to either a queue or a time. You can also bind the queue to time. So also having a relationship that says relate to, it's already a relationship. Relate to just has very, very little meaning. So in a hierarchy, related to, it's a super property of depends on, which specifies dependency. And then you can further specify dependency as a queue, so you identify what comes next and what comes after. And then can you further specify the after and before with time. Anyway, yeah, that's only makes sense to modelers. To other people, it's hard to capture. But so you have to capture here a sequence, procedural sequence, with the queue, like a queue before and after. And then you have to bound that queue, if necessary, to time, which means at a certain point in time, like calendar time. And then the super property of all of this is dependency, because they all express dependency. One is about procedural and one is about time. And I will just ditch the related to because it just means very little.
Yeah, I understand that. I think good suggestion,
Okay.
Claudio.
No, yes, also there is another topic connected to this comment. We maintained the ontology very simple and not including the workflow, because you are introducing the concept of workflow and steps. And procedurally speaking, action are connected to the steps. The steps are modeled in the workflow. In another ontology of undo and also the ontology for WHO, we introduced the workflow. But for a choice of a design, in the beginning, we decided to not introduce a so complicated problem of modeling also the workflow, because reading the text, we don't know in which step of procedural this action is included. So we need more and more information, and probably reading only the legal text of the proposal or the proposal, this information we don't have. For this reason, we didn't model the workflow and steps, but if you want, there is a pattern for this, and also inside of the previous ontologies that we made are included this. So request is composed by action. Action are linked with the steps of a procedure. The steps of a procedure belong to the workflow, and the workflow is a part of a legal procedure. But we decided to not enter in deep of this.
Yeah, a quick reaction. To me, the workflow ontology has to be, I was about to say to be imported in this one, but I think it's the opposite. You will have a workflow ontology that imports this one to express the chain of events. But that, I mean, I wouldn't make the workflow ontology part of this namespace. It's like two completely different ontology, and they can import each other, but it's a different domain. The workflow is one domain, and this one is a regulatory domain.
Okay.
And there is a dependency, but I wouldn't complicate this model, including
Good.
the workflow.
Good. It's the same page in this. Okay.
Okay, then maybe we can close this section, this part of the meeting, because we are running already out of time. And sorry for that, but the discussion and the debate was so comprehensive and complex that we took us some more time. I would give the floor to Monica Palmirani for her presentation related to the temporal aspects of modeling, and also maybe something on the execution layer of the data model. So thank you, please.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, let me introduce also Andrea Nozzolese, that is in the meeting, and he is a partner with me in the design of the main pillar of this ontology. Next, we already saw the main goal, so we can skip this objective because also Alessio introduced it. And one example of reporting request is like this. So you have a domain, evolution of international principle, the object of the action to report, and to the European Parliament addressee and the Council, and the temporal parameters that in this case every 5 years after the 1st of January of 2018. So now the parameters, the temporal parameters are really not enough and not so much expressive for capturing all the variety of the linguistic formulation included in the reporting request. So one of the goals of today is to present to you an extension, possible extension of the temporal parameters. You can see in this example that these report request, so this request create an action report, and this action of report, there is another. There's a report shall assess in particular, there's a second one, but the first one should be repeated every 5 years. So these generate also other actions over time. So the first action generate multiple other action to report over time, because there is only one report, but it's not only one, but is repeated every 5 years, starting from a given date. So go ahead and we reuse Accomatoso naming convention ALI ontology. So if ALI ontology is enough, you use totally the ALI ontology and the URI of ALI. If it's not enough for the scenario, we have, as I said, as a URI attribute for connecting also multiple other URI compliant fully with the Accomatoso naming convention. Go ahead quickly, because people skip these. We have added to the previous competencies question the last one, not only when an action occurred or what is the status. If the status of the action is suspended during the COVID, many of reporting requests were suspended, have been suspended due to the emergency. Who is in charge to do some action, the frequency, so when, what, who, but now we would like also to answer to the question which action has been executed in a given time. And so we needed to track also not only the proposition and the plan, but also the action, the concrete action, in order to compare the proposition in the plan with the concrete action at the hand, and to measure with the metrics the distance between the plan and the real execution. Next. This is we can skip because we already mentioned it. This is very interesting. As I said before, we have connected the request with the ALI expression because we have in mind, obviously, the connection of the real, authentic text independently to the format, if it is in PDF, HTML, or XML. And so we would like to have an expression, but nothing bad to also have the expression, also from the expression to a manifestation, because it's connected also with a specific manifestation or multiple manifestation. In case this URI is not enough expressive for our cases, so not the granularity is not so much important, or the document is not serialized in ALI, we have also another attributes, as I said, as URI. Go ahead. Again. This is a model that we have made. One request expressed the original text as URI in case of, you can see annotation of Accomatoso for interoperability also with the other databases, because over the European institutions, there are many other databases that use the Accomatoso FRBR tokenization of a name. So it's nice for interoperability with all the other databases, including US, including Australia, and the others. So in terms of interoperability, it's nice to have these, and for many other reasons. So the request can have a frequency. Go ahead. But we have unfortunately linked a temporal parameters called period of time that are not good enough for representing all the shadows of the linguistic provisions. Go ahead. So we have substituted now the period of time with another class for capturing all these cases that we have detected in our very recent experiment. We have implemented in University of Bologna a software, a tool of AI based on LLM, but also machine learning. And we have tested in many directions, zero shot, many shot, and also with RDF and ontology as a prompt. And we detected this kind of provision that as an odd provision, not very well recognized by the system in the detail. So not later, between, and no sooner than, and the earliest possible, and every 1 year, but starting from a given date. So we have a connection of these piece of the temporal provision, and the previous solution was not capable, has not been capable to capture all these scenarios. Go ahead. So for this reason, we have replicated, and you can see we have deleted the previous period of time, and we have substituted with temporal entity. Go ahead. And the temporal entity is more sophisticated, based on the classic pattern of a time, Allen ontology of time, but not limited to that. We take inspiration. So you can see that the temporal entity has a subclass of instant, and instant as an interval connected with end and start and end of the interval. And the temporal entity permits also to express after, before, in, ends, start, meet, overlaps, that are the classic temporal operators in the time ontology. So in such a way, we are capable to detect after, before some period of time, of a date, of an interval, to between an interval, inside of an interval, overlapping an interval, and so far. So many other situations. Go ahead. We have included also another part of execution. As I said before, we don't want entering deep of the workflow because it's too much complicated, and Claudio stressed previously is another topic of design, so it's not our scenario, but you can see that now the action is connected also with action execution. And we can discuss on the name, obviously, but what is the meaning? That the action is connected with the twin action, but real executed in the real world. And probably the plan can't be respected, may not be respected, and sometimes other actors can play. So in the beginning, it's expected to act the commission, but for some reason, not was the commission, but another agency specifically of the commission that produced the report. And so we need to replicate in the action execution that is connected with the planned action, the status, because the execution could be completed or pending or suspended, with the temporal entity as well, because the action is performed in a given period of time, different probably from the period planned before. And it is interesting because we can compare the planning with the execution, and also obviously the agent, because as I said, it happens that sometimes execution is delegated to another agent or with another rule. So, go ahead, and I'm finished. So this is in brief what we are proposing. This is a part of that we propose as an extension. So action execution is connected with the action because execute the action, and in a given time could be different respect the planning, and with some agents that are playing different roles inside. So this is this permits to track also what happened after the proposition of the planning of the reporting request. I think it's all, and
yeah, may I just ask you one question? Go back to this previous slide. Why did you introduce your own classes and not reused all time? Because all this whole structure on temporal relationships, etc., between time, etc., is in all time. That exists over there. It is exact the same structure.
not really, because not really. Because the instant that is more frequent in the legislation is not a class per se, but is derivated by the interval with such property. In this model, we can simplify having the instant first, because the frequency is the instance. So by the 1999 or 2029, we need to do so. So it is a little bit different for maintaining simpler the instantiation of the instant, so dates.
I think we should investigate this.
Yes, there is other properties in the relationship in the top, after, before, in, and, start, meets, overlap. In is not included in the all ontology time.
But only for one property that is not there, that would be very weird. There will be, just to add, then everything in your own namespace, that would be counterintuitive to my opinion.
No, but pay attention. We dedicated a lot of time of this discussion internally. If I reuse all the time, because all time in the legal domain is very difficult, because it's based on the interval mathematics approach. You know better than me that everything, all the operators are based on interval mathematics. Sometimes the vagueness of the terminology doesn't permit it to have a correct and precise and consistent annotation based on interval. So we risk to use a mathematics based on the intervals without scarcity of data, and so to accommodate something that is not consistent. So for this reason, we prefer to have our ontology that take inspiration for this, but we have instant. And if you can notice, we have also annotation that is not here in case of incompleteness, because several times we have vagueness. So when the act is the delegated act entering force, or when the standards from ETSI enter in force, or similar. So because the language in legal domain is vague, and we need to be more flexible, and we take in consideration these parameters in this modelization.
Yeah, I'm rather skeptical still on it to go for our own model for everything, because then we raise a lot of questions. From if somebody from the outside comes, will immediately raise this exact same question as I do now. That's the thing, yeah. If you have similar structures and you do it in your own, you have to make a strong argument and a good maintenance reason why
the
you
strong
would
argument. Yes, the strong argument is the experiment, because we needed to be feasible the extraction for the legal text and to annotate in secure and meaningful way for legal use case. This is a main guideline that we have in mind. So not the accurate 100% of the ontology in the past, but also to adapt for the feasibility in the legal domain and the reusability of information for the legal purpose. So if I use a more strict temporal model, believe me, in the legal parsing of the text, we don't have a chance to maintain consistent information, and so you can retrieve something that is not true.
Okay, thank you very much, Monica. I think this was a very interesting proposal, by the way, and I think this debate to whether to how much do we, when do we stop the reuse and build our own? It would make sense. I mean, I see both arguments make sense, and it's really the good for me the difficulty is really try to strike a balance between the two. And I think this also would need a specific longer meeting to really discuss this. Also maybe to convince Bert, or I see that also Claudio has some concerns, and maybe it's really worth also maybe freezing this aspect for a little bit to really all of us recollect our thoughts and being able to reflect on this in time. We will have all these discussions and the motivations in meeting minutes. In the meantime, since we are already 15 minutes late, I wanted to say that the next community meeting, as mentioned by Davide, is gonna take place at the early April. We haven't set up a date yet, but from what I hear from all this discussion, there will be other occasions to really speak about the concrete topics, perhaps during the weekly meetings that we have during really the operational working group. And I proposed already to Monica that next week she would take part to this weekly meeting to initially to really discuss a specific argument, and for all of the other people that would have expressed their opinion. I read Tamas, but also Joeri from the legal with a more contribution on the from the legal theory perspective. I think it would be useful maybe to plan some specific aspects and some dedicated session to each topic. Having said that, many thanks to all of you, and we will keep in touch. We will share with you as soon as possible the recordings and the meeting minutes, and we also submitted this. Monica actually submitted this paper to endorse, I believe, and it was really focusing on the RNV. And again, we should also keep in mind that in any case we have also some how do we say operational constraints, that at a certain point, even if it's not perfect, such systems shall be used for a real system such as data model, and for this, it's at a certain point we will need to make some trade-offs between perfections, formal correctedness, and the real need of implementers. Yes, thank you very much, and have a nice rest of the day. I think we can stop the recording.
And yes, maybe as a last point, it's worth mentioning that the next